Here are 3 Metroidvanias I played recently: Yoku's Island Express, Ori and the Blind Forest, and Axiom Verge. Ori and Axiom are quite well known, while Yoku's Island Express is a little more under the radar. Let's take a look at them. Hi kids, do you like Metroidvanias? Want to mix in some pinball mechanics for some mania? Want to build your own graphic engine for it? No Unity or retro graphics making use of 8 bits? Alright, terrible rapping aside, Yoku's Island Express is when you end up with a game that mixes in pinball with Metroidvania. It's well worth your time if you're looking for something in the Metroidvania genre that's a bit out there and outside the box from the norm. How did this indie studio Villa Gorilla come about? Jens Andersen, one of the founding members of Starbreeze, who worked on titles such as Chronicles of Riddick, very different style than what we end up with here, went indie for a bit in 2008, releasing Colors on the DS, eventually returned to work briefly at LucasArts, but decided again that he wanted to change from AAA development. In 2013, he founded Villa Gorilla, along with another Starbreeze veteran, with the intention of making a game in a year as opposed to the 3 years like most AAA games. They started with the concept of a ball, which turned into an open-world pinball game that they described as a joke to friends. But they found interest in it and moved forward with development. So how long did it take for development? Did it take a year? Well, no. 1 year went by, then 2, and in the end, it was nearly 5 years before dropping in early 2018. A bit of George R.R. Martin levels of estimation there.
Yes, there is something I want to ask you. How the fuck do you write so many books so fast?
Part of this was due to the unusual move of developing their own engine for the game, as opposed to going the now standard route of using something like Unity. So how did the game turn out? Let's take a look. We're a beetle with a ball, and we go around delivering mail on this colorful island that's full of variety and a lot of soul. There's no jump, but instead we'll be spending a lot of time navigating around thanks to the wonders of pinball. As far as unlockable abilities go, the main ones that we will receive include the slug vacuum, used in certain points to progress forward within the pinball aspects, a swinging ability to make progress through the world, and drumroll please, swimming underwater! Woo! We'll be collecting fruits as currency to unlock pinball flippers to make progress and find new secrets, and there are plenty out there. The pinball is fairly forgiving as you don't need to be tilting or anything, and it doesn't overstay its welcome throughout the game. You get a nice sense of challenges as far as progression goes, but nothing too challenging or too easy. The game is vibrant with a great art style that no doubt plays a part in the engine being a creation by the team as opposed to going with something like Unity. The main village serves as our hub, and we have 3 main objectives to go through throughout the game, and we are free to explore. We can unlock these barrels to make our way quickly across the island, but what's also nice is we could stop off at various points along the way. Plus, it's just fun to shoot yourself around the island. The music is great and has a lot of variety for all the areas that we'll be in. Pinball music is great here too, but nothing quite as cool as the Black Knight song for pinball. As far as shortcomings go, the spin ability to jump up higher can be a bit frustrating at times to aim accurately and go where you want to, and that happened quite a bit throughout my game and was a bit frustrating. Maybe it was just me pulling a DSP, or perhaps others had the same frustration as well.
I did nothing wrong. I did everything correct.
It would have been nice to see another ability or two to change up things a bit, as I felt the game still had some legs and could have gone a bit further on that front. The ending was a bit anticlimactic and felt like it could have used a bit more build up to what they were going for. That said, these are all fairly minor points, and this game is well worth your time if you haven't played it, and it's a bit overlooked when it comes to the Metroidvania genre. If you're looking for a Metroidvania that goes a little outside the box, Yoku's Island Express is a great use of your time. Ori and the Blind Forest is a beautiful game. It's a bit of a cliche at this point to say that it plays as good as it looks.
So pretty.
Don't let those looks fool you, however, for this game isn't afraid to kick your ass over and over again.
Fucking goddamn fucking...
Don't be surprised if the game does stir up some strong emotions in you for the way it tells its story.
Ron, where are you?
I'm in a glass case of emotion!
That's Ori and the Blind Forest in a nutshell. Ori falls just a tiny bit short of what I call the elder tier Metroidvanias, titles like Hollow Knight and Super Metroid, and with just a few small tweaks, it would be there. From what I understand, the sequel addresses the issues, which I look forward to getting around to one day. But let's focus on Blind Forest right now. Ori's developers Moon Studios was founded in 2010 by ex-Blizzard and Animation Lab alumni, and was way ahead of the curve in its approach of being a virtual studio with talent spread all over the world. Way before a certain worldwide pandemic caused other developers to work virtually as well. The team looked to games like Super Metroid, Symphony of the Night, and Super Meat Boy to build a foundation of what was to become Ori and the Blind Forest. Early on, the team decided to go with Unity so they could get testing, prototyping, and pitching to developers as soon as possible, and pretty quickly came up with a platforming demo that they felt was just as tight as Super Meat Boy. And with that, they were able to land a publisher quickly, and they hit the jackpot with Microsoft Studios, which for them was a very positive experience. On that note, it is somewhat amusing to see the Microsoft font used in the game during cutscenes. The team looked to the works of Studio Ghibli films, The Lion King, and The Iron Giant for epic storylines based on core human issues. After years of hard work, Ori and the Blind Forest was the end result. So how did it turn out? Ori and the Blind Forest simply flows. The platform feels incredible, up there with titles like Super Meat Boy and Celeste in regards to how tight it feels. We have our standard type of unlockable abilities in Metroidvania genre like the wall jump, a glider to fall slower, but the big one here that stands out is the bash mechanic. Use it in the air to shoot off lanterns or enemy projectiles. Chain it together to keep making your way up. When this works, and it mostly does, you get into this incredible rhythm and into a flow state where you can just soar through things and it feels damn amazing that few games can match. The last area of the game in particular is a highlight and does a phenomenal job of testing out everything that you've learned throughout the game and combining all these abilities in short little bursts that will get you into this flow state. And it's one of the better last areas of the game I've come across in a long time. I've talked about the concept of flow in the past in a couple of videos of Resident Evil Remake and Resident Evil 2 Remake, and how in those games you get into this flow of determining what items to take with you, what to drop off in the item box, how many healing items to take, how much ammo to take, what items you picked up and where to go. While the flow state is different here, I do want to point out how Ori has that feeling too of getting you into the state where you're just flowing. Because of how well the game controls and feels, I found myself revisiting past areas to access areas I couldn't before. Even if most of them just led to ability orbs or health upgrades, which I didn't really need later in the game, it's just a joy to run and leap around in this world. Again, it plays just as good as it looks, though it's not perfect. I felt the double and triple jump felt a bit weak, they felt like they lacked some oomph. And having the slam attack in the air to be mapped to the down button did lead to a few times where I did slam by accident. Not enough to be a deal breaker, but it happened frequently enough to make note of it. In all actuality, the bash ability is so good they could have dropped some of the other abilities that you lock and went more with it and brought it in earlier into the game. The charge jump, for example, at the end of the game, didn't really add much to the platforming. Using the charge jump to get from wall to wall did slow the game down a bit, which takes away from that flow, and the game is best when you're moving quickly through areas. Like Celeste and Super Meat Boy, if you die, you come back very quickly. And in this game, we laid down with spirit energy where our last checkpoint was. It's an interesting idea that I wish the game went further on. It plays more of a factor early in the game when you have to be more conservative as you don't have that much. And there are times when you could either open a door that requires a spirit or you could use it to save. It does become a non-factor later in the game, but it could have been more of a factor later in the game as well. I like the idea behind it, something they could have explored further to create more of a risk-reward situation with it. I love when games make use of that. Bit of a missed opportunity. The number one flaw by far is the combat. There's nothing special to it. You have the spirit flame and the charge, and that's about it. They could have removed combat outright and the game still would have been just as good. That said, I have heard and seen that combat is quite a bit better in Will-o-the-Wisps and seems to have taken cues from Hollow Knight, which I've done a video on. So that's fine by me, and I do look forward to checking that out in the near future, but here, combat simply detracts from the whole experience. The short chase scenes are spectacular from a visual and immersive standpoint, but they can be frustrating in terms of situations where you simply have to memorize to get through these areas. It's all trial and error, because you can't lay down your save points. As the game takes that away from you, it becomes more memorization. It can be more frustrating than fun. There were a few times here I was ready to throw the controller down in frustration.
Fucking goddamn fucking...
Usually I find Metroidvanias are of good length and don't overstay their welcome, but I felt that Ori could have still gone a little bit further and added another area, because it still felt like it had plenty of gas left in the tank with everything it offered. This is even with playing the definitive edition. This is a rarity I find in gaming, for I usually find most games are too long and stretch themselves out, and instead need to trim the fat. But not here. So mentioned earlier, the team went for a story that looked to the works of Studio Ghibli, Lion King, and Iron Giant on core human issues, and the game does a great job with it. It's a very simple story instead of having lore spread out for you to find or being all alone in a hostile world like a lot of Metroidvanias do, which is a nice change of pace. I would have loved to see more use of gameplay to tell some of the story as opposed to cutscenes like the game did at the beginning. It's not a deal breaker though, and they're well executed and told. It's nice to have a simple story that tackles these human themes with a small cast of characters, and the game does a great job with it. So if you haven't played Ori and the Blind Forest, what's wrong with you? Get on with it.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it.
From the works of just one developer, Axiom Verge stands as one of the better Metroidvanias on the market, and one that is well worth your time if you haven't done so already. Axiom Verge is probably the purest Metroidvania in regards to wearing the Metroid influence on its sleeve. It's always nice to see others to pick up that ball and write their love letter to games like Metroid with their unique twist on it. While it does wear that heavy influence of Metroid, it makes enough tweaks and its own splashes to the Metroidvania formula to make it its own and delivers a really satisfying game. How did it come about? Well, Axiom Verge comes from the mind of one developer, Thomas Happ. Everything is done by him: art, design, music, akin to something like Cave Story, which was another one-person team. Development took about 5 years, starting in March 2010 until its release in 2015. Thomas initially worked on this game on the side as he was a full-time game developer working in the AAA space. He looked to the Metroid series as main influences, especially in map design. In fact, for his capstone project in college, he created Orn, a ROM hack that was based on the first area, Brinstar, of Metroid. He looked at other games like Contra for the feels of combat, controls, and the boss battles, along with other classics like Bionic Commando and Rygar. Thanks to the Sony Pub Fund program, he was able to go part-time on his job and eventually quit about 6 months before the game came out. The child on the way and savings near zero, a lot was on the line for the game to work. Even more, Thomas saw the passing of his dog Max around that time. A lot was on the line. Luckily, the game was a great success, selling well and receiving critical acclaim, which warms my heart to see someone take such a huge risk like this and have it pay off. Giant Bomb's Jeff Gerstmann, notorious for being a very harsh critic, gave the game 5 stars, so obviously something went right here. The game goes with the 8-bit look, which could be a bit cliche for a lot of indie games, but it works here really well. The enemies are distinct and different areas stand out from one another. Thomas also did the music in the game, and it creates a fantastic soundscape, ranging from some really interesting voice sounds to some dark pulsing synths, including some really creepy ambient tracks that just ooze atmosphere. When it comes to exploration, Axiom Verge takes a more hardcore exploration approach while not giving indication of where you need to go next, as opposed to Ori or Yoku, but also other titles like Metroid Zero Mission or Metroid Fusion, which I did in the past, that gave you more indication. That said, the game does give you the option to put down some reminders on your map, but you can only put down 2 in each section of the map. If you're like me and have a 30-year-old boomer mind that's maybe losing some of its edge, that's where you might get a notebook out and write down exactly why you mark these areas down on your map. That said, I didn't find myself needing to look up where I needed to go next, and I have seen people dock the game on this front, and I can understand why. While the game can be done in a couple handful of hours, depending on how much you explore, having long breaks in between sessions, which is always a possibility, can lead you to forget to where you should be looking at next. The game follows a fairly linear structure at first, guiding you down further, picking up new abilities along the way, with various other areas blocked off, and even putting some stopgaps along the way where you can't backtrack until you make further progress and pick up new abilities. Eventually, you can make your way to the middle of the map where you can get this large tunnel with this head thing to move around quickly from point to point. This is the point in the game where you can really start to backtrack for some optional and required items to move forward, and it's nice to return to these areas with what you have now. That said, I feel there were some areas that could have been a bit more interconnected and had shorter distances in between. Not a deal breaker or anything. Of course, we also have to look at the abilities that we have here, and Axiom Verge does take some interesting twists on that Metroidvania formula. There is no double jump here, although we do get a higher jump. There's this really interesting addition as the Field Disruptor. It's one of the more unique things that the game does, and you can use it in the game to bypass glitch blockades, but also affect enemies. Using this on enemies for a few seconds, and you'll have some interesting changes. Perhaps that enemy will give you health, they'll shrink, they'll run away or slow down. It makes for some interesting strategy when it comes to the game's combat. Early on, you'll see some holes that your Metroid instincts will kick in, and you think that a morph ball would go through, right? But what do we get? Well, we got these drones that we could shoot and control, and these make for some interesting areas as you go ahead with your drone as you remain behind. Closer to the end of the game, you'll be able to upgrade so you could teleport to where your drone goes, opening up new areas and allowing for more creative, fun ways of exploring. We get these stylish coats to allow us to teleport past certain sections of walls of length, again opening up new areas. This can be combined with the drone to explore new areas, and it's quite fun and something I wish the game made more use of. Perhaps having this teleport earlier in the game could have done with that. We also get this bionic commando influence with the hook shot. I wasn't a big fan of this one, it just felt a bit awkward and clunky to use, especially later on once you get the drone upgrade and you could teleport around, it takes its place. The game would have been better off just removing this hook shot and instead getting the drone teleportation earlier in the game. On the note of combat taking influence from Contra, you could see in all the various weapons that you could pick up, and there are many of them, and a lot of them are optional, giving you a nice variety of what you want to use. In close range, the standard shot, following the enemy, multiple projectiles, you have plenty of choices of what you want to make use of. There's a nice variety of enemies and ways to deal with them, and making use of that field disruptor adds a nice layer of different strategies and ways to get by. On the note of the bosses, most of them are just okay. The scope and scale of some of these are quite impressive and make for great spectacles, but felt like there was a bit of a missed opportunity here to make use of some of your abilities during these fights as opposed to just finding the weak point and shooting. Granted, the game's combat was influenced by Contra, so it took from that aspect. It had been cooler if bosses were made to have more abilities that you can make use of during the fight, such as teleportation or the drone. On that note with bosses, I do enjoy how they give you plenty of warning of an upcoming fight, being very ominous, having a save point nearby. So if you do die in fights, and it will happen likely, you don't have to go too far. Overall, it's an incredible game. It's always great seeing the work of one person put something together and have great success with it. Can't wait to see Axiom Verge 2. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Leave a like, subscribe. I have some more upcoming videos on Metroidvanias. I'm currently playing through Blasphemous, which has been quite interesting. Also have something to say about AM2R, another Metroid 2 remake as well. Other Metroidvanias I currently have up on the channel are Metroid Zero Mission, Metroid Fusion, and Hollow Knight. Alright everyone, I gotta go back to punching boulders. Boulder punch out.